Okay, I think 2 minutes is time enough for everybody to get in. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest session of engagement regarding the proposals for the Elleray Hall re-provision and the provision of much needed social accommodation within the Teddington area. My name is Councillor Gareth Roberts. I'm the leader of the council, if you don't know, so hello. And today we're going to be taking you through the latest thoughts and schemes which we will hope to be taking through to planning at a later date. And just to give you some background as to how we've got here, we started out with consultation under the previous administration in 2018 regarding the community hub proposal. And that proposal was not so popular. So the council then began conversations with the Ellery Community Association to develop a different approach. January and February of 2020 then brought a consultation for a 4-week period, face-to-face with events with design boards, officers on hand, etc., to answer questions. And there were emails available and an online questionnaire. And this, in turn, reported to the June 2020 committee. Now, this is a second engagement period that we're embarking on for these specific proposals. We had one about a week or so ago, and we've had 2 online events so far, including this. We've got the questionnaire, and there will be ability for hard copies of the questionnaire to be sent out. So if you know somebody that doesn't have access to the internet or isn't comfortable using online materials, then do just let us know. Drop us an email, and one assumes you can do email because you've been able to email and register for this. So just drop us a line. There'll be the usual consultations at email address, which will be shared with you at a later date, and just ask them to, we'll send a paper copy out. Happy to do that. Then, once all this has been done with, there will be a next stage of statutory consultation, which will be the planning phase. And everybody will have their opportunity to give their views, thoughts, etc., through that statutory consultation, and all views will be taken into account, of course. In addition to all of that, we've been through various committees, which have been public meetings where the proposals have been discussed, and those were in January, February and June of 2020, all of which had representations from residents, and all of which are open, and future ones will be open for residents to make representations on those. So that's the background. Where we are today is a Zoom format, so just some basic housekeeping. Everybody's on mute at the moment, and if, when you can, you want to ask a question, just type the word question in the chat. Please don't write big loads of text in the chat, because what happens is that people write these enormous bits of text, and then people who want to ask a question get missed, and they get very shirty, and they'll send me an email saying, how dare you deny me my democratic right to speak? And we don't want any of that. We want people to be able to ask questions. So please don't put lots of stuff in the chat, because it means people might get missed. Also, don't use the raise hand function, because what happens on that is you get shoved into a different list of people, and we can't find you. So don't use the raise hand, just put question in the chat. If you want to put a flavour about what you want to ask about, that might help, but no big screeds. People we really want to hear from today are going to be people who didn't get the chance to ask last time around. So I'm going to try as much as I possibly can to be prioritising those people. So if you had a big, lots of bites of the cherry at the last meeting that we did, as I say, about a week ago, then I'm going to be prioritising other people. So who we have on the just in terms of what's the word? Decorum is possibly the right word. We do have the opportunity, if people start, effing and jeffing in the chat, or maybe start going, slightly blue when they ask their question, then we do have the opportunity to take people into a side room and ask them if there's a problem and find out if we can help, and before we bring them back in, because we want to try to make sure that this is as measured as possible, and it observes the decency of debate. And however, this is Teddington, so I don't imagine we're going to be having any of that sort of thing going on. So who we have on the call today, we're going to be hearing a presentation from Andrew Gilbert from Hatton Associates, and he's the architect of the schemes. We have various councillors. I see Michael Wilson, Councillor Wilson is here, and Councillor Richard Baker and Councillor Ellengorn are both on the call, and they will be here ready to listen and perhaps weigh in with any issues or responses to questions. I see Councillor Piers Allen, who is the chair of the Adults Social and Housing Committee and Health Committee. And on the officer cohort, we've got Mick Potter, who will be able to answer all your questions about parking and stuff like that. We've got Anna Sadler from the engagement team. We've got Sylvester and Dave from the project management team. And who else do we have? We have Richard Wiles, who is in charge of commissioning for services on behalf of the council. And I'm sure there are other people that I've missed. We have John Evans, who's the assistant chief executive directorate, and various other people who, as I say, I may have missed, so apologise if I have. So enough of me going on. So as I say, start writing if you want to get a question in early. Please make sure you just write a question in the chat. And now we're going to hand over to Andrew Gilbert, who is going to take you through the scheme itself. So, Andrew, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. Right, okay, well, as pointed out, my name is Andrew and I'm an associate with Clive Chapman Architects. It's been mentioned that this is the second of recent public engagements, and I'm here to explain the proposals and give people the chance to provide feedback, either with questions now or via this online questionnaire. The central idea has always been to replace the old Elleray Hall that's coming to the end of its lifespan with a new community centre and hall, but with modern facilities. And after initial feedback, it was decided that the best option was to locate the new centre on the more publicly visible and accessible site, and that's namely the underutilised East Car Park and former North Depot off North Lane, which is some 20 metres away from the old hall's sort of current position. That would then leave the existing Elleray site available for a new residential development of affordable apartments that could financially support the building of the new community centre, whilst being more in keeping with the surrounding residential character of Elleray Road and Middle Lane. It will be important to make sure that both proposals meet with planning policy while protecting the privacy of established neighbours. And with that in mind, planning advice has been provided on a number of occasions and current proposals amended accordingly. The buildings will follow sustainability criteria, with the new community centre aiming to achieve BREEAM Excellent, whilst the affordable housing aiming to achieve zero carbon. This will entail the use of high levels of insulation, air source heat pumps for heating and hot water, and photovoltaic panels for electricity. Beyond all this, the community centre will meet the needs of the current users, which is the Elleray Community Association, but also the needs of the borough and wider community, therefore hopefully establishing itself as a new community hub. So maybe we have the first slide. Okay, and the next, thank you. So this is the location plan with north up the page. The slide shows the location of the sites in relation to Broad Street, which is at the top of the page, and also each other. Site 1 to the left is the car park and depot off North Lane, and that's opposite the Tesco car park. Site 2, which is to the bottom right, is the existing location of Elleray Hall, and with a surrounding residential area. If you go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So this is the master plan showing the two proposals and their roof plans. The idea is to locate the new community centre at the car park site to the left, with the building split into wings. This would leave site 2 available for a new 2-storey residential building that would front Middle Lane and Elleray Road, together with a rear mews that would curve deeper into the site. This mews has been specifically designed to avoid overlooking and overshadowing by placing it in the middle of the site away from boundaries, with tree-lined garden spaces on either side. But this will get discussed further in the presentation. If you go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So these are the floor plans of the proposed community centre. The site layout is on, the site layout and ground floor are on the left, and the first floor to the right. The building is broken down into 2 wings, with a hall to the top, with a pitched roof containing a predominantly double height space. To the bottom is a supporting community facilities. A car park of 5 spaces plus an additional minibus bay are to the front forecourt, which is this tan area to the left. Then you've got landscaping, which is around the perimeter, especially between the new building and Middle Lane to the south, whilst a larger garden is offset to the rear, and that's around 265 square metres. In looking closer in the plans, The main entrance, shown with that small little red arrow, takes you into a glazed foyer area with a reception and office space, and that's shown with the blue colour. On the opposite side will be separate toilets, including a disabled toilet, shown in purple, and also there's the stairs and lift to the first floor. Deeper into the building, there is a kitchen at the heart of the centre, serving a cafe and lounge space, and the main hall itself. There are also 2 specialist rooms for things like hairdressing or therapies, and a separate quiet room for reading. Now, if you look on the top left, looking at the hall, this is a large open space of around 143 square metres. It's proposed to be able to be subdivided either with folding walls or acoustic curtains, and they're shown with the dotted lines, with the idea that it could be used by multiple groups all at once. At the back of the hall would be glazed folding doors out to a landscaped terrace area marked Garden Terrace. If you look to the first floor on the right-hand side, we've proposed 2 multi-purpose activity rooms, and they're shown in purple, a further disabled toilet, plus an additional staff room with its own toilet facilities. So how does this building actually sit within the neighbourhood? If we have the next slide, please. Thanks. So this slide shows a 3D massing model view looking from North Lane and down Middle Lane across the frontage of the community centre. You can see that the building is set back from Middle Lane with a roof angled away, reducing its scale. The parking area can be seen in the foreground. That's just sort of behind this green hedged area, with the glazed entrance and reception beyond, and that's underneath the canopy and the Elleray sign. The hall wing then sits slightly proud, in line with the terrace along North Lane, and that's off to the left. We have the next slide, please. Thanks. So this image is an aerial view from North Lane looking south. It shows the rear hip ends and areas of flat roof to the 2 wings, and they're wrapping around the proposed communal garden. This has been provided to reduce the visual impact to neighbours and has been stipulated by the planning department. Now, as a sort of note, you can start to see the housing scheme appearing in the background there. So what does the actual building look like? Can we have the next slide? Great. So this is the front street scene from North Lane. The appearance is of a brick gable building using local dark stock bricks with red brick detailing. Strong recessed glazed elements respond to internal spaces, with a tall vertical window to the hall. You can see a glazed wall then underneath the Elleray sign, which actually highlights the reception. And then you have this square window there to one of the activity rooms. The overall aim of the sort of character of the building is for a modern public building, whilst being in keeping with the materials of Teddington. You can also see the reason for the pitch roofs, angling the building away from the neighbours and placing the taller elements more central to the site. And this is key to avoiding overshadowing to neighbours and hence meeting planning criteria. It's also worth noting at this stage that the design proposes lowering the ground level of the community centre by approximately 3.5 feet from the current raised hard standing of the car park. And this lowering of the building further reduces its scale. We have the next slide, please. Great. So this slide shows all the elevations of the centre together. The top image is the front elevation, which you've actually just seen in greater detail. The next is the side elevation from Middle Lane, and it's showing the hip end and flat roof to the right, reducing the visual impact to the neighbours backing onto the site from Elleray Road. The third image is the rear elevation, and this shows Middle Lane to the left and the proposed communal garden to the right. Now, a black dotted line marks the position of the existing garden fences to the terrace houses of Ellery Road. And hopefully, that sort of shows that they will obscure the bulk of the community centre. The last elevation is the side elevation looking from the communal garden. And I suppose I should note at this point, windows to first floor rooms that might face neighbours, they'll all be roof lights, so angled towards the sky and avoiding any overlooking. So that's the hall. So let's move on to the housing. If we have the next slide. Great. So this is the site layout and ground floor plan. The building contains 12 one-bed apartments, 2 two-bedroom apartments, and 2 wheelchair units on the ground floor. It responds to the site and surroundings in 2 different ways, with the front part having a long frontage with a narrow depth, mirroring the depth of the neighbouring houses on either side, and then the rear section is the curved mews. So if we start at the front, the first 2 units on the ground floor are the fully adapted wheelchair units, with their own front doors off Middle Lane. The right-hand unit has its own allocated parking space adjacent to it, and that's the little town area at the top right. The left-hand unit will have the possibility of an allocated on-street parking space if required. Between the wheelchair apartments is a staircase that leads up to the first floor and the 2-bedroom apartments above. Overall, the front building will have a low hip-to-end roof, again following the character of the houses on either side. Looking now to the rear mews, this has a pedestrian access from the top left of this plan, shown with the blue dotted arrow. It winds through the landscape front garden with screening trees and links to 3 entrance doors serving 4 flats each. This path then continues deeper into the site, stopping at landscaped communal gardens at the bottom left-hand corner. So in terms of other amenity spaces, all the ground floor units have their own private gardens, and they're predominantly to the right. The upper floor units will then have access to this communal garden. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is the first floor, and a key sort of feature of the design is the arrangement of windows. The front building has no windows on the sides, protecting the privacy of neighbours to Middle Lane. The rear mews has angled bay windows, both front and back, directing views away from adjacent buildings and aiming towards the south, as shown with those blue dotted arrows. One last window is located at the very end of the building, but this will be of obscured glazing. I suppose the approach here is to follow planning policy and keep the distance between proposed habitable room windows and neighbouring windows to over 20 metres apart. Another consideration is that the rear mews building will have a flat green roof of native wildflowers. So it's not only reducing its visual prominence, but also following sustainability criteria. The rear wing will also be lowered in the site marginally, bringing the height down even further. Now, I've got one further point here related to parking. It's that the overall residential development will be car-free, except for the wheelchair units. All other new residents will not have access to parking permits. So, what does the building look like? Go to the next slide, please. Great. Right, this is the view down Elleray Road. Now, the new scheme can be seen at the end of the road, closing off the street, with the building in similar proportion to the existing houses along Middle Lane. And you can just see the disabled parking space nestled down there to the bottom left. Go to the next slide. So this is an aerial view sort of above Elleray Road. You can see the residential scheme to the left with its hipped end roofs to the front building with the flat green roof curving off to the rear mews. And you can also note, now you can see the rear of the new community centre and the communal gardens there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the front street scene looking down Elleray Road. The appearance, hopefully, is of an elegant brick building using similar materials to the surrounding houses, such as buff stock bricks and red brick detailing. The roofs are natural slate with low pitches, again similar to the neighbours, but windows are meant to be simple casements, possibly with a more modern dark coloured aluminium. And overall, the character then is a sort of modern version of the surrounding domestic architecture. Go to the next slide. Good. So this is the last slide for today. And this shows the remaining elevations inclusive of the rear mews to the back of the site. They show a brick building lowered in the site with a flat roof behind a small parapet. A black dotted line and shaded area shows the position of the existing boundary walls to neighbours, giving an indication of the screening of the building, especially, I suppose, with the introduction of new trees. The angled bays are then vertical elements around this curve, proposed to shield the neighbours and protect their privacy. So, I mean, that brings us to the end of the walkthrough of the schemes. The objective has always been to re-provide the Elleray Community Centre with a modern, sustainable building, but with a distinctive Teddington character. That the residential development is there to financially help deliver this new centre whilst providing important affordable housing. And that both designs aim to be sensitive to existing properties while being positive additions to the neighbourhood. I suppose I'd say lastly, as part of this process, we'll assess all comments that are received following this public engagement and the previous, and we will review the design again. Then proposals will be taken to an independent design review panel for further assessment. And that's prior to any possible planning application, and as pointed out earlier, the standard statutory consultation process. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Now, I mentioned earlier that chances were that I'd forgotten some of these, so I now have to issue a mayor. Michael Hill from the Elleray Community Association has joined us. And so we've heard what the scheme is going to be, and Michael is going to talk us through some detail regarding why the scheme and a new Elleray Hall is needed. So, Michael, are you there?
Michael, you're on mute, but we've sent you an invitation to unmute. Sorry. I can see you passionately speaking.
Sorry, I'm now unmuted, I think.
Perfect.
Okay, well, I'm Michael Hill. I'm a trustee of Ellery Community Association, and I live very near Elleray Hall as well, so I'm very local to this development. When we get into the proposed new community centre building, it's going to be a big improvement for us. Not only will we be in a modern, attractive, safe, warm building, there'll be enough space for us to be able to develop and extend the range of activities that we offer our members. And that can only encourage more and more new members to come on for the friendship and the fun. But over and above that, it'll be a lot livelier than Elleray Hall because we'll be in a community centre. There'll be enough space to enable all sorts of other people to use the building, even during our social club's opening hours. Now, that was something that was rarely possible at Elleray Hall, and we frequently had to turn down requests from other groups and instructors. We'd also be open 7 days a week. Currently, Elleray Hall's often closed at weekends, and we'll be doing our very best to make sure that the new centre really is at the heart of the community, with something to offer everyone who lives in and around Teddington. So what else are we intending to do there? Well, we're intending to attract all sorts of classes, lots of different physical activities, pastimes and pursuits. I don't know, bridge, chess, art classes, model aircraft making, that sort of thing. There'll be a fully equipped kitchen too, so maybe we'd be able to hold some kind of themed cookery classes. Incidentally, there have been comments that our coffee bar could take business away from local cafes and coffee shops, but I really can't see that happening. The coffee bar, I prefer to call it a coffee bar to a cafe, to be honest, but the coffee bar is really for our social club members and people who are already in the centre, attending events or running events. If anything, the centre is going to draw people to the high street, not away from it. Starbucks need have no fear. Do I have to add that other coffee shops are available? We'd love to get University of the Third Age involved with us. So hopefully there'll be some semi-serious stuff, but we'd also welcome more informal groups to get together to enjoy whatever it is that turns them on. Folk music, stamp collecting, anything. We'd also like to see activities aimed at helping people who are having a difficult time on the job front. I'm talking about things like training and retraining, CV writing, practicing interview techniques and the like. We'd hope to have CAB, Citizens Advice Bureau, on board as well, provide a local source of advice on important things like debt management, consumer complaints and landlord-tenant disputes, all kinds of matters. We feel that the NHS would welcome the opportunity to make use of the centre, along with counsellors, life coaches and other healthcare practitioners. In fact, there are all sorts of organisations who we think would find the centre ideal for their activities. NCT, National Childbirth Trust, Scouts. In fact, we've already had a few inquiries from people wanting to know what's happening and when they can get in, but obviously it's not going to be for a year or a good year yet. Finally, of course, Richmond is a borough steeped in the arts, so we'd see a big role for exhibitions, plays and live performances. But don't worry, we'll be very good at this. We are, after planning, to be the very essence of community. In short, this community centre is going to be terrific. It'll be a community asset which will have something to offer everyone living in the area, one that will contribute to making Teddington such a great place to live. So I hope that's given you some sort of picture of what we're in for in the long term. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. So we're going to be moving into the question and answer session. A few things just to bear in mind. Unfortunately, we can't talk about money, about how much this thing's going to cost, because of course this is commercially sensitive, and we don't want to give the developers or the builders an advance copy of how much they can start charging us, because we need to make sure that we are delivering value for money for local residents. And if we tell them how much we're going to spend, then that will be their estimate. So it's commercially sensitive stuff, so I hope you'll understand. So we're going to, as I've said already as well, I see that there are questions from people who had a really good bite of the cherry at the last engagement. So I'm going to try as much as I possibly can to prioritise people who I don't recognise as having asked a question at the last time. If there's time left over at the end, of course, we will go back to those people who asked a question the first time round. But I'm sure you'll agree that we want as many voices as possible to be heard throughout both of these engagement sessions. So that's why if you see me leaping over your question, that's the reason why. However, I would stress I'm not infallible. So I may call somebody who did get a question the last time. So please, don't take it as a personal snub that you've been overlooked. It's just, I'm getting on a bit. And the old grey matter isn't as sharp as it used to be in remembering names and faces. So Dave is our first question. And if you'd like, you will get a message. There you are, you're unmuted. So over to you, sir.
Well, firstly, I'd like to make it clear that we do not support the present proposal, and we want Elleray Hall to stay in its current location where it can provide all the services Michael Hill talked about. We do not believe the council has performed a thorough option analysis, and if it believes it has, it should share the decision support package with financial information removed to allow comment from residents who actually understand the local detail. My question is in two parts. The density of the proposed 16 flats in the residential setting is blatant overdevelopment. The councillors have the choice to develop the site with a reasonable amount of units that can still provide social housing and affordable housing in keeping with the characteristics of the area. Why are councillors supporting such overdevelopment against local residents' feedback? And is this type of development in Teddington what voters should understand councillors will be promoting in future election campaigns? That's my first part. Would the council like to answer that?
Well, if you'd like to give us your second one, and then we can get them both tailed off at the same time. And
Okay.
I'm sure.
Councillors should be aware we are in an ecological emergency with major species loss. Bats are a protected species and use Elleray Hall gardens and neighbouring gardens which are dark at night to feed. There is no light pollution and the area provides an excellent supportive habitat. The proposed plans will destroy this habitat, introduce light pollution at night and stop their flight paths with two-storey buildings in inappropriate places. How has this been addressed in the present proposal?
Okay, so thank you very much. There's one about whether this is going to be overdevelopment, and there's one whether a thorough environmental impact assessment has been conducted. So which of our officers would like to assist with this one?
Well, shall I pick up the second question?
Yes, please.
Regarding the ecology. A preliminary ecological assessment has been carried out, and it has flagged up the possibility of bats. And there's going to be an additional two surveys actually, when the season opens, which is in May. And that's an emergency re-entry survey. And that's to exactly check that bats are present and possibly roosting in the current building. If that is discovered to be the case, then yes, there is going to be a level of mitigation. We have to try and look after the ecology of the area. And there is a process in doing that. But at the same time, the sites in ecological terms, the housing scheme, does replace a single-story building with a two-story building, but in sort of footprint terms, there's not a lot in it. And the building actually will retain and actually sort of provide new gardens and possibly roosting places, not only for bats, but also for other native birds. And as part of the planning process and ecological process and zero carbon and BREEAM process, we have to show the enhancements to the current site. It can't be neutral, it's got to be enhancements. So that's just a housing. The fact that we're taking a car park, which is the hard standing, 100% hard standing, and actually introducing, I think, as I said, about 265 square meters of that's one communal garden, but also there's the perimeter planting and landscaping, is a dramatic enhancement to the actual locality, above and beyond what's there already just at the Elleray Road site. So more surveys coming, the assessment is part of the process, and we have to then demonstrate the enhancements that both schemes will provide.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And Sylvester is going to take us through the planning issue regarding overdensity of development.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Just to add to what Andrew said, is as part of that submission and the consideration, lighting is also taken into account, because obviously with the bats and so on flying, so as far as any light spread, light pollution, that's considered, that's as part of the design, planning submission, and the ecological impact assessment that's also submitted as part of the whole planning process as well. So we're not throwing light pollution up and getting in the way essentially of the bat migration, bat movement, foraging and so on. And that enhancement could be bat boxes, bird boxes and other elements, and loggeries on the site for insects and other invertebrates and insects and so on. As far as the comment that was made, or question that was raised about overdevelopment is concerned, as part of the planning process, we have, as a kind of project team, looked at and discussed with planners what is considered possible in the area, based on the space available, based on the need for the area. And there have been different, over the past, would have been a year and a half, I believe, there have been different consideration of numbers on the site. And actually, the number that had, I think an earlier number that had been put forward as a design, I think was up to 18 units. And it's at that point where that actually was considered overdevelopment for that site, for the area, for the the infrastructure to the area. And actually, as part of that, there was a reduction to 16, which again, falling within planning policy, planners in initial advice were comfortable with and didn't deem overdevelopment, as we were able to provide sufficient amenity space. And that's for the ground floor flats, as was highlighted in the presentation, and similarly for the first floor flats also. So at the moment, we believe we are working within policy for advice, and that is the proposal we have on the table based on the space of the site, its density, and advice we've been given by our planning officers.
Okay, and of course, concerns regarding both ecological impact and concerns regarding overdevelopment are legitimate planning concerns, which can be raised as part of the planning consultation and speaking at the planning committee, which I have no doubt that this will come to planning committee almost certainly. Will this come to planning committee, Anna, do you think? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it will do.
So I hope that answers your questions. We're going to move on to a different question now about the closure of North Lane East Car Park well, it's Angela Hackett. It may be Mr. Hackett that has the question.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name's Roger Hackett and I live in Ellery Road. I'd like to support the comments that were made by my neighbour before he asked his question. I think they are very valid questions. In the committee reports that have been to the council over the last year or so, there's been mention made of the process that the council needs to go through before it closes the North Lane East car park. I'd like to try and understand a bit better about that process, as different reports to me seem to have said slightly different things, and I'm not clear about how much engagement and how much opportunity there will be for local residents to make their views known about the closure of the North Lane East car park.
Okay, I'm going to, would this be one for Mick Potter perhaps? It's a parking issue, it's a process issue, so perhaps it's one for John Evans from the Assistant Chief Executive's Directorate, because obviously that relates to council processes. So either gentleman who wish to jump in can.
Okay, if I could just start from the parking side. Of course, this overall project will go through the planning process. And of course, a major part of this process is, of course, the closure of the car park, as we all know. So we will go through that process. And in the report that we submitted to our own committee, the Transport and Air Quality Committee in January, we brought to the attention of the members of that committee the possible closure of the car park. But of course, it is subject to that planning decision. We follow a statutory process within our team in terms of closing a car park, in terms of the operations of the parking places and the charges that we operate in there, the pay and display. And we advertise a traffic order to close that car park, to cease its operation. That is a statutory process, part of the process in when we make any changes to parking places, any changes, or if we revoke any existing arrangements. So there are two parts to the process mainly. So it's this planning process, and of course, if the planning committee approve this scheme, then it will require us to follow the statutory process of advertising the traffic orders, and the process involves a 3-week consultation period in which representations can be made to that, and in which case we would then, following the end of the consultation, we would publish a report detailing those representations and then the decision.
Okay, thank you, Mick. John, do you have anything to add to that?
Councillor Roberts, no, nothing. I think Mick has set out the position absolutely correctly, so nothing more than me.
Yeah, I think it was very comprehensive. Thank you very much for that answer, Mick. We're going to, let me see, so as I pre-season event, so sorry to those people I'm about to leapfrog, do apologise, but Tamsin Ballantyne, I think, is the next person who didn't have a question before. So Tamsin, are you there?
Yeah, hi, I live at 51 North Lane, and I would just like to say that I too am against the moving of Elleray Hall to a new site. I'd also like to add that my mother is a user of the facility and she is also against moving the site. So my question is in 3 parts. We're very concerned about the safety in such an already congested and overdeveloped area. All of the roads surrounding the new development are narrow thoroughfares already. There are many houses of historical architectural value, with buildings adjoining fences and no side passages. The North Lane end, where the council plans to build the new community centre, is continuously affected by traffic approaching the car parks and supermarket delivery vehicles. The narrow pavements leading from Broad Street has had to be reinforced by bollards, making the pavement even narrower. So my questions are, how would the emergency services be able to respond and gain access to the new overdeveloped sites? How would wheelchairs, mobility scooters and disabled guests access Elleray along the North Lane, along the narrow path with bollards on the east side of North Lane? And how much more congestion will there be for drop-offs and pickups?
Okay, 3 good questions. Thank you very much for those. Tricky to know how to allocate those ones, to be honest. Additional congestion. Oh, Andrew Gilbert.
Well, I'm just to try and pick up some of those points. First of all, the emergency access, which is absolutely a fundamental point. The nature of because a fire engine, will get to the base of Elleray Road, but clearly can't enter into the site, as it can't do really at the moment. It means we'll have to, or we have already got a fire strategy person on board to assist us in the design work on this. And in essence, what we have is a dry riser system, so that the front of the building can get complete access. But if indeed anything ever did happen, the fire brigade can get access to the rear of the building with a dry riser system, which is basically a pipe laid underneath the ground that they can connect to just off the street, and actually then connect the hoses deeper into the site. And it's a fairly standard way of dealing with sort of landlocked sites. On the access or accessibility, I suppose one should say, the whole scheme, or both schemes, especially one being affordable housing and the other one being for a public facility, will have to follow clearly building regulations, Part N regulations, but they often go to sort of much higher standards. There's a British standard 8,300, which is the guidance on general accessibility for all. And that does cover, from door thresholds, access to and from, public highway, whether footpaths, whether roads. It's the access throughout all the buildings, and we have to comply with that. And especially with a community centre, it's going to be designed really specifically for the elderly. So access is critical. As a brief comment.
Okay, and congestion perhaps? Who wishes to deal with this? So we'll be doing traffic monitoring, I should imagine, around the area. Mick?
Yes, this will be part of the proposals with the work that's been done to date by the architects. But in terms of congestion and drop off, of course, the existing North Lane West car park will provide a useful area for people to pull up and park short stay. So that's it can only help the situation there, having that facility nearby. But in terms of the overall plan, this would need to be submitted with the application. I'm not completely 100% sure on how this will, with the application come together. I might have to bow to colleagues' advice on this, but yes, and obviously there needs to be assessment on the actual the access to the site there.
Thank you. And of course, it's worth noting that the development itself, the housing element of the development, will be car-free, and that people who choose to move into these properties will be told well in advance of choosing to move here that they would not be eligible for a car parking permit within the controlled parking zone. That's part of the deal. So if they choose to live there, they know that they will not be able to get a parking permit for the CPZ. And I think that's largely covered up. Just on the access for, whether it's the case, is it not, that the various routes through from is it Middle Lane and Elleray roads, that access passageway is going to be retained onto North Lane?
Yes.
Yeah. So people will, if people choose to use the pavements on North Lane, they can use the pavements, but of course there are alternative routes which they could choose to use to access. So hopefully that covers off that additional question. Okay, thank you.
Robert, can I add one more thing, please?
Yes, Sylvester, of course. Yes, of course.
Thank you. As Andrew mentioned about the fully accessible spaces, as far as the community hall is concerned, the new centre is concerned, the parking arrangements that it also has a disabled parking space itself, and then has space for its minibus. So, and that quite a large number of users access the site via minibus, so they can be brought right to the site's entrance, dropped off, and it is parked on site out of the way, so you can still maneuver around and exit. And clearly, obviously, the accessible space, it's level throughout from entrance to actually getting in the actual centre itself.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that useful additional information there. We're going to go to Malcolm Eady, who has a question. Malcolm, you're on mute.
Sorry about
that.
There we go. I really should know about that by now. I've got two questions, but first of all, I'm one of those fairly cynical people that think when a council develops something, you end up with something worse. Can I congratulate the architects, having looked at the facilities? They've really done a very, very good job, probably better than I would have ever hoped. But as a user, I I've been a treasurer for 26 years of Churches Together, and every Christmas we organise the Christmas lunch there. We have about 100 guests. So my questions are about the usage. The hall is going to be slightly smaller. Have we any idea of how many people we can probably sit down for a meal in there? And the second one is, can we be confident that the service during the building and the moving process will not be affected at all? So in other words, the users won't be affected by us building this. Thank you.
Shall I pick up then the question about the hall and its usability? I mean, first of all, it has been sort of run through with the Elleray Community Association very closely. But you're absolutely right; it is slightly reduced. I don't know the figures straight off the top of my head in terms of seating, but with a hall of that size, especially with the fire escape, and if you are having sort of the standards of a hall of that size, it's going to be around about 280 people could use that hall. As I say, that's standing. So one would like to think, without doing the absolute calculations, and we can provide that as part of this feedback process, but we'd like to think that you should be able to have the same capacity as you have currently. I'd be really surprised if that's diminished. But also you will have better functionality of the spaces, not only having the new kitchen where it's located and how it can have a servery to the hall, let alone the sort of access to terracing outside. You've also got the I think it's 3 different routes into the hall or egress to get out as well. So it should be better in its general functioning as well. I think, well, we could say about the continuity. I don't know if Sylvester would like to pick this up.
Can do. All right, thank you. I think one thing that has actually been quite, paramount key objective of the delivery of this project and working through is maintaining the continuity of the delivery of the community services based out of Elleray Hall. So it's because you've got the older people services that are delivered are part of the council SILS contract, which is community independent living services. There we go. So that's something that's want to be maintained throughout. So as far as its service the older people, which is why the sequence of works is proposed to, or one of the reasons the sequence of works is proposed to develop the community centre first. So it's developed, it's completed, and then we can decant from the existing Elleray Hall into the new facility. So then we can maintain that ongoing service for vulnerable adults and obviously offer a greater service to the community. So that is something that we're, it's a key objective to maintain the offer.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Malcolm. And we move now to Nathan Dixon.
Hi there.
Hello, Nathan.
Hi. So I'm a local resident on Elleray Road, and I have 3 questions. The first is on site traffic management for the construction of the housing development. How do you intend to manage that, especially bearing in mind the poor state of the road as it currently stands, and the fact that there'll be lots of heavy goods vehicles and construction vehicles using that road? Then the second question is on the nature of the housing scheme. I've had it called social and affordable housing, but I'm not quite clear what the nature of the housing scheme is. And the third question is on the construction phasing. Obviously, there are 2 site developments there that are going to quite heavily adversely affect the local community, and it's a built-up residential area. Have you considered staggering the construction such that one site's developed after the first and there's a break in between?
Okay, thank you very much for that. Sorry, I may have inadvertently muddied various waters when I mentioned social in my introduction. It's easy to do. So what we will do is we're going to get you a precise response on that. So First and foremost, site traffic management, that will of course form part of any planning application, but who would like to assist with this particular question?
I could start. Yeah, thank you. As Councillor Roberts has already raised, as part of the planning application, there will be a requirement to submit a construction management plan, and the construction management plan itself, what it will outline, this is based on parking surveys that we need to carry out, based on the proposal for the development, and it's kind of how we propose to deliver the development, the amount of construction traffic, the times of the day that traffic can happen as far as its deliveries, its movements, also sizes of vehicles, where they will be, where any drop-off will be, where anything will be located. Also, we'll take into account the actual welfare location, so site cabins, things like that for the actual construction team itself. And it'll basically be testing road widths, tracking access, and trying to minimise disruption to the existing infrastructure, the existing parking, and use of those roads themselves. Because in order to develop the either of the developments, what we can't do is completely disrupt or disable the arterial roads in that space, or the roads in the area. So that will need to be provided as part of the planning submission. The contractor, when we go through procurement, that would come on board. They similarly would have to deliver that, and that is tested as far as their logistics plan are concerned. They'd have to ensure that they meet the requirements of the planning timings, of the deliveries, for example. Because of the size of the site, we would, there's initial conversations around the sizes of deliveries, whether they'd be working to more of a just-in-time delivery, so less deliveries and less materials kind of on site, so then they can actually take any of their vehicle storage, things like that, and bring it within the site itself. Whether there's an option for, again, still being determined, still be discussed primarily with the contractor, for the housing, particularly whether there's any modular aspect to that, which then would again reduce the on-site disruption and time on site, because majority of that will be done off-site factories, particularly around use elements to the rear. So these are things that are being discussed over this next period of design, and would be picked up when we go into the market to have that initial discussion with contractors to how we can basically reduce any disruption further. The other part I would go to, which I think was the last question, was about the sequence of the development. Currently, the proposal is actually to develop the community hall first, so the new community centre first on the North Lane East car park. And then when that's developed, when that's completed, that would, there would be a natural break, because we'd need to decant essentially from the existing Elleray Hall into the new space. And then there'd be the the ensuing demolition and so on. But as far as its actual development on that site, that's something, I think as Councillor Reedy suggested earlier in the discussion, would be being carried out by our partner developer. So we'd be selling that. So we wouldn't be doing that, but there would be a natural break within the development anyway. So it wouldn't be a continuous, year and a half, 2 years of work.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Sylvester. And Dave Sharp is going to help us out on the type of housing which will be provided. I hope. There we go.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Yes, so the current scheme is proposed at 100% affordable housing. The discussions that are currently and negotiations are currently taking place with housing providers to understand what type of affordable housing that we will be delivering. I'm unable to disclose the detail of that on the basis that that's commercially sensitive information, and for the reasons that were said earlier, those discussions need to remain confidential for those reasons at this stage. But the intention will be to provide 100% affordable housing. That affordable housing could well be a split of tenure, which could include shared ownership and social rents, and the exact split of that will be determined by the current marketing work that's currently being undertaken. Okay,
thank you for that. As you see, it's a minefield when you get into affordable and tenure mix and all of that. So that's possibly why there was the light confusion. Becky B is next with a question.
Hello, yes. My question was actually kind of much just answered the difference between affordable and social housing. You've obviously said that you can't disclose what that affordable going to look like because of commercial reasons at present. When are you going to be able to share that with members of the community?
Excellent question. So, Dave, can you come back in on that?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the intention as it stands is to have that concluded by the time we submit a planning application. So we should, because it's a linked planning application. So the application for the affordable housing and for the development of the new social centre will go to planning at the same time. So we'll need that information will be in the public domain by the time we go to planning.
So it will be something that people can comment on as part of the the planning construct. Excellent. Good. Right. Thank you for that question, Becky. We're going to move on to Stephen T.
Morning, everyone. Sorry.
Morning.
Kids noise in the background, so apologies if that disrupts.
That's why I've come into York House today to do this.
So I'm a resident on North Lane, also a permit holder in North Lane East car park, and a user of Elleray Hall, both maybe now and in the future based on my age. So a few things. One is that I'm quite concerned that a lot of the parking surveys and analysis that's been done on the impact of traffic at the moment are not looking at the different changes on the table in parallel. So there's a CPZ survey going on, there's a development survey going on, there's 3 different sort of strands of changes in the area. And obviously I don't think they've been assessed in parallel. There's a point on the permits for North Lane East where the proposal is that they would move to North Lane West, but only on a temporary basis. And I don't really understand why that wouldn't be a permanent move. I'm hugely supportive of the facility being upgraded. I think great that would provide extra usage, 7 days a week, all great things in theory, but obviously that will have a knock-on effect on increased traffic and requirement for parking in the area. And we then remove a car park, which could be used for electric vehicles, which were very short of electrical charging points on this side of Teddington. And so we're really keen that we don't miss that opportunity to do something good there at the expense of I still want to upgrade the facility, but why would we make it harder to then make the most of that by removing parking?
Okay, so there's a few questions there. Mick Potter, I think, is probably going to be able to answer the majority of them.
Okay. So in talking about the first point about the 2 schemes, this development and the surveys and the controlled parking zone consultation work that we've done, absolutely right. I mean, we try to bring these together. The parking on the street, we've done the consultation. We have approval to press ahead and implement the scheme there, but we need to do some further consultation with the local area on how the scheme will work, mainly on the days and hours of operation. The main benefit of this, obviously, addresses a number of residents' concerns. We had support to put controls on the street, and this will remove the non-residents parking on the street and prioritise it for the local community. So provide parking for residents, local businesses, and some short stay parking we'll be looking to provide as well. In the local area. We're covering quite a lot of areas. If you go to the report on our website from January committee, you'll see we've done quite an extensive review, and the work is continuing. This also provides us, in line with the policies, to look at electric charging points, car club bays, the provision locally in the area, other initiatives, cycling initiatives as well, all of that together. So very much with this project, this is taking that into account to try and bring everything together as much as possible. In terms of the permits, are all very much linked. The reason why that we were looking at that as being a temporary arrangement is we do need to keep monitor the use of the North Lane West car park. There are, I think, 10 or 11 season tickets issued at the North Lane East car park, brought in many years ago. And we, of course, intended to keep that arrangement in North Lane West. We didn't know at the time that the controlled parking zone would be approved. It had to go through the committee. Now with it progressing, it will need to go through further consultation and the traffic order process. We would be looking to take those permits basically to allow you to apply for resident permits for the new zone, just like with any other resident. And this will be with the main aim of the bigger car park being there for its primary use of being a turnover car park, maximum stay 3 hours, but there for local shoppers and the businesses.
Okay, electric vehicle charging points and the loss of same. Can you help us with that?
Well, yes, we work with a team in our department who deal with the requests for those. We have put some in the car parks, but we also do put them on the street. We've got proposals going through at the moment. I'll need to take this away, but obviously that with any parking scheme we do look to put these in, and obviously it's very much high on our agenda to do so. So there is a program for those to be implemented across the borough. So we will be looking at that, for these measures for this area at the same time. As we progress this scheme and we implement the scheme, generally the way we do it is we endeavour to try and put the points in at the same time as implementing the scheme, or separately, especially where we've had specific requests to put them in, or we know our data shows that there is quite a number of users in the area that would benefit from that.
Thank you.
Could I just add a little bit to that?
Yes, Andrew, of course, yes.
In very simple terms, it is also going to be a planning matter that the electric charging points be introduced into the community hall scheme. So that will be taken into account.
Thank you. Okay, the one thing which I do know about charging points for cars is that we have these discussions with developers and people wanting to bring forward new schemes for charging, is that the current process of plugging in apparently is going to be somewhat obsolete in about 10 years. Everybody's talking about induction charging through smart pavements. So we're always keeping one eye on various developments regarding charging, and of course we are trying as much as we possibly can to introduce the trickle-down lamppost things. I've just seen my laptop is just about to die, so I'm going to plug it in. It's the trickle-down stuff from the lamppost, which will also be introduced. There we go. And so ability to charge electric vehicles is very high on the priority list of this administration. So next question is going to be Claire Williams. Claire Williams.
Hi there, it's Matt Williams. Claire is Claire's downstairs looking after the kids. So I'm a resident on Park Lane. I guess like pretty much all of the local residents who voiced an opinion, I think I failed to understand. I just think this is a misguided development and my point is the removal of the North Lane car park. Have you considered what the impact is going to be on local businesses, and have you consulted the local businesses to solicit their feedback, especially sort of post-COVID, as the high streets are looking to re-establish themselves? Is this really the right time to reduce the amount of parking in the local area at a point where presumably businesses are trying to re-establish themselves?
Okay, good question. So who's going to be able to assist with this particular one? Not particularly, I want to try to drill down on the consultation with businesses. Who can help here? I will point the fickle finger of fate at somebody if nobody volunteers. So.
Well, I'll just.
Truth is, if it hasn't been done, then can you just make sure it is done, right? That's I think the timing of this exercise is pretty grim, to be honest. That we're talking about this at a point where it's very difficult for people to engage in the process. That this can't be in a more public forum, just makes this very difficult. So, is it worth you extending this process to a point where people can just interact in a more normal way?
Okay, so I'm going to ask Alice Adler to come in and see she's unmuted. She may be able to help with engagement issues, and I'll ask Mick Potter to come in again and see he wanted to answer. And then I'll come in on the current milieu, for want of a better term, or a less pompous term, about consultation in general.
Thanks.
Sure, thank you. So with regards to engagement, you're right. This is absolutely a strange time for us to be in, and it is a different way of engaging than how the council would usually do it. So we would usually hire a hall and have some boards where people can come in and interact with what physical images. However, we have been engaging on different schemes over the pandemic and over the period of the pandemic. And there are a couple of schemes, another one we've been working on at Twickenham Riverside, where we have actually had a higher engagement turnout than we have done previously, where people are physically coming to the location where we're holding the engagement. I'm not saying that that works for everyone, it's a different audience. So what we're seeing over the trend of the pandemic is we're engaging with more working age residents. And we've had comments in other engagements where people have said that they find this more accessible. Now there will be other people that really don't find this more accessible. So for example, in this particular scheme, it's important for us that we engage with the members of the Elleray Community Association. And so we've been working with them to send out hard copies of the board, so printing them out, making sure they've got prepaid envelopes, and the association has been working very hard to make sure all their members are engaged in that way. We've contacted the schools and the churches, everybody that's on our community engagement stakeholder list, to try and make them aware of this. I think that in terms of elongating this engagement process, we're doing this for 4 weeks, but it's certainly not the only period of time that residents have to engage with us. So before we launched this 4-week period, we were having, we received emails, and we have an email address which is on the website where residents can send any queries to us. We will then go and do the design development, and then there'll also be the statutory period of consultation that happens at planning. So I think you're absolutely right that for some people this will be a harder way to engage, but our experience has shown us that for others it has been more accessible. And in terms of the opportunity to engage with us, that is there. So this is a period of time to have a look at the designs and the proposals that are out there, and to fill in that questionnaire and come back to us or email us. But once this period finishes, we will still be here, and we will still be responding to any queries or any concerns that residents have. And then we'll come back out for that public consultation at the planning stage. So I think it's a very long period of engagement, and here is the formal part of it, and then there's a consultation part of it, but we are here listening all the way through. With regards to engaging with businesses, I think probably Mick and I will cover that between us. I don't think, and Mick, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've directly consulted with businesses over the North Lane East car park.
No, no, not as yet. No.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we take that point away, and we'll consider how we do that, how we go about engaging with businesses, so that we can take that forwards with the parking consultation.
Yeah, if I could just add to the work that we've done within the parking team, is that the controlled parking zone, we will be looking at the provision of spaces for all groups affected, and that includes people coming to the area, the visitors, the short stayers, even though there is the car park there. And it's a question of also the timing. If this is approved, that when the car park will be closed, and myself and Anna will be needing to liaise on the timings of that, so that that there is, as much as possible, we can provide some turnover spaces on the street to try to maintain as much as possible that side of the parking in the area. But yes, that's it. It's a very important point, and we are very, very mindful, of course, of the effect of the last year on businesses, and want to do all we can to help businesses across the whole of the borough. Yeah, it's a very, very valid point you've raised there.
Okay, just for people who may not know, Mick, and you might not have the answer to this question, but how many turn? I know that there are, is it 10 resident bays in, so resident parking zone bays in North Lane East car park. Do we know how many sort of just general turnover bays there are, which could be lost if this goes ahead? I say lost in that. You said
yes, I've got 21 on, for the smaller car park is 21 spaces.
Okay, and does that include the 10 resident permit bays?
No, they're not permit based, Gareth. They're basically there are 10 season tickets issued in that car park.
Oh, I see, I see.
And they can use any of the 21 spaces that are pay and display. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Bingo, got that. Sorry, just to get clarification.
No,
because, you know, it helps other people listening in. Okay, in terms of the, I mean, Anna covered off a lot of the points about the ability to reach a wider audience, and we have found during the pandemic. I mean, to be honest, I'd much rather be in a big, you know, hall and chit-chatting with various people face to face, one-to-one. Is, you know, what we do. But we have found that events such as these do reach a very wider audience. We did one on Hammersmith Bridge closure just last Wednesday, I think it was. And we got 500 people coming along to that, and they were able to ask questions directly. And we were also able to, you know, engage with them in a virtual format to answer questions, you know, in the chat. Because we did it a slightly different version this time. It was a webinar version, so there was the question and answer thing rather than the chat, which isn't really very good. So we do reach more people, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. The sooner that we can get back to doing face-to-face consultations, the better. And but I still think that this has a valid role, and it's something which we'll be continuing with, because I don't think it's really going to be a case of either or. It's going to be a case of both, to be honest. Excellent. We're going to move on now to Richard Hatton, who
Can
has
I
a question.
just add one tiny
Yes,
thing
Anna,
to
yes,
that?
of course you can, yes.
I think there's just, so there was a point raised about how public these events are. And I think that the council is demonstrating how transparent it wants the process to be, in that we are recording these sessions and they are going up on the website, and they are there for anybody and everybody to have a look at, to see what questions have been raised and what answers have been given. And if we were doing this face to face or in a public hall, but we haven't previously ever recorded those sessions. So I think in some ways, and in every way that we can, demonstrate that all of these questions and the sort of local community voice is being heard, is being recorded, and is being put on the website for everybody to see, you know, how we're interacting in these sessions. So we're trying very hard to make sure it's as public as it possibly can be.
Indeed. Thank you for that, Anna. Richard Hatton, have you had the chance to unmute yet?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk today. We do appreciate it. We live on Ellery Road, and I want to echo the comments that our neighbours have made about not supporting the scheme. As it stands, we don't see the justification for it, and there's a couple of comments I want to make on that. I do think that COVID has changed the landscape here, and we are aware that there are other facilities in the borough, and certainly in Teddington, that are no longer in use in the manner in which they were previously, which really should be considered for a suitable site for some sort of hall facility. There was some discussion of that at the previous meeting that was held at Elleray Hall. However, the details around that process and the engagement with the community on that, I don't think has been made clear enough. So I think that's one for the council to take away and look at. I want to make a comment about the volume of traffic on Elleray Road. Recently, there was a site assessment done both at Elleray Hall and North Lane East Car Park. And this is a particular concern to the residents on Elleray Road, but I suspect also North Lane as well, that within an hour of that process starting, there were 5 articulated lorries on Elleray Road, which, as you know, has no exit for a large vehicle. The process around the traffic management, if such a thing is to eventuate, is absolutely critical. I watched all of those vehicles remove themselves from this road with great concern about potential damage to the 2 vehicles on the road. That, I feel, is something that Sebastian perhaps will be taking under his wing based on the commentary. To my questions, though, I think, Mick, as it relates to parking studies, one of the issues we have with the way the parking studies are being conducted is that we're not considering traffic volume flows on either of these roads, and that something needs to be done in that regard to look at the volume of both cars and trucks, especially on Elleray Road, that transit this space. Obviously, I've been working at home for a year, and I've sat on the sofa watching hundreds of cars a day move up and down this road. Building on this road is very, very difficult, as we know. In the last 5 years, we've had 4 major building works conducted here, and it has been a big problem. So the traffic management process for how this works out, if it does in fact go ahead, is vital for the neighbourhood, let alone the disruption of building. The particular question I do want to ask, though, and Gareth will probably not want to answer this, is around, bless you, is around the cost of the building. When we first went to the meeting at Elleray Hall, there was a figure of around $2 million being discussed. We've seen recently in the documentation that's been submitted that that's now changed to 3 million. I'm concerned about the cost of this build and how that may change. We're still obviously in preparatory stage on what plans are going to be enacted. However, that could easily change to 4, 5, 6 million pounds. I just want to understand, at what point does the council call a halt to this, because it comes too expensive? We don't feel that that's good value for money. I think Marcus Rashford would probably agree that that would be better suited to be spent on school meals, for example.
Well, at the risk of getting the party plug-in, we have been making sure that this administration has funded all free school meals throughout the pandemic, in spite of the fact that we didn't get funding from federal government to do it. Party political over. What we're going to have now is a response on this one, because I think we can, to an extent, talk about increases in costs in the abstract, but not go into the detail. I think we're okay on that. Maybe somebody, one of the officers, can, wrap me over the wrists in a, in a virtual fashion if I'm straying too far into that sort of issue. So Sylvester, I see, is unmuted.
Yeah, I think what I would say from a construction, again, talking in the abstract, not being too detailed, from a construction perspective, the actual development cost, for the hall themselves, and actually to to actually develop and create that hall, they are pretty similar. So actually, what we have had to take into account is, which I think was made evident in that paper you're referring to, was that the costs that were previously considered were just to develop the hall, whereas the costs overall that are now being considered are to develop the hall, but also to do all the enabling required for the housing development. So, and with that comes all the specialist consultants, surveys, design, all those consideration, all those costs basically. So that's an increased cost, and then as part of the actually can't say that, sorry. But yeah, so overall enabling works to dispose of that site are now being taken into account. So there's an increase in budget to reflect that. And then also there's an increase in budget, which was a particular concern of councillors, of members, about the, just having that element of contingency for, as you talked about, potential raising costs. Because I think taking into account where we are, the information we have, there has been some market discussion about investment of that on that site and sale of that site. So taking all of that into the round, that's kind of where we are, and there's been an increase to reflect those current bits and the enabling, effectively, of providing the housing, the affordable housing.
Okay, thank you for that. So is there anybody else that wishes to come in on that issue?
Well, if I could just touch on the issue of the traffic side of things. Yes, of course, this is obviously the one road there, and whilst it's got parking controls that operate into the evenings, they're quite long controls. The traffic is interesting to hear that there's been recent traffic issues. If there's work's been going on to the houses, which of course will go on. I think it really comes down to obviously the construction management plan taking into account the location and making sure that that's developed to ensure the disruption is minimised, and obviously safety in mind very much. So that will need to be worked on, and my colleague Sylvester will liaise with us in parking and traffic on the final sort of plan for that.
Can I add something? Sorry, just to say that I don't think that anybody really is debating the need for the new centre and the need for Elleray Community Association to have a building which is fit for purpose and for the community. If we didn't have the affordable housing development, if we didn't have the enabling development, then 100% of building that new community centre would fall to the council. We wouldn't have the value of the housing scheme to support and enable us to deliver that. So for the council, delivering affordable housing is not just about providing affordable homes, it's also about bringing in value so that we can then go on to build the community centre. And so I think it's just important to note that if we were just rebuilding the community centre, that would be the cost that we have in the committee report, that full cost would fall to the council to pay for. We wouldn't have any affordable housing enabling scheme to be able to subsidise that.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing that there's now lots of chat going on, which is difficult to find the questioners. Rebecca Morse has a question. I think Rebecca's got two questions. One is about the access to the affordable housing, but then there's a more, I think one that's not been touched on at all, which is about soundproofing. So Rebecca, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Excellent, hello.
Yeah, I've lived in Teddington all my life and I'm a user of Elleray Hall and yeah, hope to be using it into my old age. And the first question really has kind of been answered already. That was about the affordable housing and who would be eligible to buy it. You know, whether it would go on the open market or whether that would be sort of on a needs base through the council. The second thing was about soundproofing in the building. I belong to a choir that used the hall and yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be much better to have the separate spaces because at the moment there are people in there trying to have a chat and a cup of tea while the choir's trying to rehearse. And I wondered about the soundproofing and whether there will be a stage as there currently is in the hall, you know, for plays and performances. Okay,
I can think of no better person to answer this than Andrew Gilbert. Andrew.
Great, good questions. The soundproofing. We have an acoustician who's already carried out a background survey of the area to set a benchmark of outside noise. And they're also then doing a report on recommendations on levels of insulation that we need then for the facility, either to protect the wider neighbourhood, but also to make the spaces as usable as possible, especially between the rooms and areas. So that's coming through basically as part of almost like a bit of technical design. So we know the facility can work before we put something in for planning. So that's all in hand. With regards to the stage, that's a really good question because that's something that actually the previous consultation period, we were talking to the ECA about that, you know, whether they needed one, what was the best way of doing it. Currently, I think the thinking was it could be a collapsible stage because actually in the hall plans, the back wall, there's a whole line of storage because every hall needs storage. It's always something that seems to get missed. And so the consideration was, well, you know, do you need a stage? Well, it seems possibly more of a temporary item. So it looks like it'd be something that would be collapsible and brought out when necessary.
Okay. Excellent, thumbs up there, so that's good. Another subject which we haven't had answered at either of these consultation periods or engagement sessions, let's call them engagement sessions, is about the green roof. Ollie Sanderson has an interesting question about the green roof. Ollie, are you there?
Yeah, hiya. I'll just read my question out.
Yeah, sure.
Who will look after and maintain the green roof of the new residential development on the current sites? Inevitably, in a matter of months, it will become mossy, brown, and overgrown if not treated regularly. This will become a tremendous eyesore for all neighbouring residents.
Right, that sounds like a question for me. The green roof be maintained by I suppose the housing association or registered provider who will likely run and look after the housing scheme. It'll be part of their maintenance program. But in design terms, we've gone through the consideration of how that might happen. So if you go back to some stage, look at the plans, the roof plans, we've broken down the roofs into almost the different clusters of units. For example, where you've got a front door which takes you to 4 flats, that particular roof is broken down into one section so that there can be an access hatch, most likely through a roof light, but in the communal area that will allow access and for maintenance with the correct safety systems like man-safe systems, so that can be maintained. But each one can be maintained individually. So it sort of breaks down the scale of maintenance. And if, for whatever happens, the tenures might get split up, so it might be a shared ownership block or an affordable rent block, they can be maintained separately. And then if there are maintenance charges, that can be managed as well. So we are thinking about this process. I'd also say that as part of the planning, they're getting, they're pushing for these green roofs, quite rightly, but they're asking for a lot more detail now, how they're built up, exactly what's going to be the nature of the medium. It's not going to be sedum roof. They are looking for more this wildflower mix, and they're going to be quite specific about that. So it's going to be checked, and it's going to be, hopefully it's been designed and it's got maintenance in mind.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer.
Sorry, Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, Sylvester.
What I would add to what Andrew's just said in response to Ollie's question is that with regards to the roof itself and the green roof, there will be an associated planning condition. In order to discharge that planning condition, you will have to provide full detail of what the various materials, what the various kind of species are, should I say, and how they will be maintained. So that is all part of that discharge of that condition. So you need to provide that information from the outset, in order to occupy those buildings. So that's what the developer will need to do.
Okay, there we go. So thank you very much for that answer. This brings us to 12:29. We're due to finish at 12:30. So I would like to thank everybody for the questions which they put forward. And thank, of course, Andrew and Michael for coming along and giving a non-council view on this. So, of course, Andrew's got skin in the game and Michael's got skin in the game. So, but also to the officers, Mick Potter and Sylvester, Dave, Anna, everybody who's been there to help. Your ward councillors who've been on the call, listening in, taking notes of your views. So, Councillor Baker, Michael Wilson, Councillor Ellengorn, and Councillor Allen. Richard Wiles was on the call. We didn't need to raise a question with him. He's the commissioning manager, as I mentioned earlier. But as always for these things, it's always thanks to you for coming along and taking part and asking such interesting and challenging questions. And I'm sure that this will not be the last time that we discuss Elleray Hall re-provision and housing. So don't forget that is going to be, for any consultation such as this, there will be emails that you can contact us on and such like. And what's the next stage going to be, Anna, in terms of this?
So we're running the engagement, until the 7th of April. Well, then the consultation team will then analyse the results, and that will take them a couple of weeks before we get the report back. Then that will go to the design team, and we'll need to use what comes out of this process to inform the design development going forwards. And I suspect that you, as members, will also want us to either publish that report on the website, or we'll take it to a committee, an upcoming committee. And then we're aiming for a planning application towards the end of June. And Sylvester, correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, June is correct. But as part of that submission, there will also be a community engagement submission, community engagement strategy, I believe it's called, which will highlight all of the engagement we've done from last year's consultation, this current engagement, the engagement that we've had with Ellery Community Association, service delivery heads, going forward, really just to and planning advice just to feed into the actual submission itself. So that will all be captured in a document that gets submitted along with the rest of the planning application in June.
Yeah, and then there'll be the statutory consultation process that comes with the planning process.
Okay, and do remember, if you do know people who cannot take part in online consultation exercises, that paper copies of the consultation will be available. Are there any going to be available at Teddington Library, do you think, Anna?
We haven't sent any to Teddington Library, but we could make that, what are we on? Yeah, we could make that available. So at the moment, people can contact us on the website and via the email address, and we send copies directly to them. We thought that would be the most accessible way, but we can. Yeah.
And they can phone the council's main switchboard and request one, I imagine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because that's the problem. If they don't do email, if they don't do online, it's jolly difficult for them to ask for one by email or online. So, so thank you very much for your time this morning. It is now 12:32. So again, thank you for your challenging questions, and no doubt we will speak again in the future. Take care and goodbye.